there have been some cases over the years where I guess you'd call mystery men, speculating it may have been government, were interested in some cases I worked on. But the two cases that really come to mind would have been from 1973 during that big wave. Down in Derry Township, on this particular day, I was down with my team that evening in Hermione, PA. And while we're there, I get a call from the 911 center of the radio system, and I heard it on the monitor in my car. They were requesting me to send a team up to Derry Township. They just had an incident in this large mobile home community, and the police were on the way there. Well, we left there. It took us a while to get there. We arrived on the scene. When we got there, the police officer had already been there. He found some possible tracks. He preserved the tracks for us. When we got there, we found out this family's in their mobile home. They hear like this baby crying sound from outside the back of their trailer. Something was scratching on the backside of the trailer. They had a dog outside, but the dog wouldn't bark. It was like whining very low, like it was very, very scared. And they opened up the back door, and here's this very tall, dark, broad-shouldered creature that runs between a few of the trailers, and other people see it. My team gets there, we're interviewing the people. We found that the main electrical power line that went under the ground to the trailer had been ripped up out of the ground. So that's an interesting energy connection right there. So here's the rest of the story. I believe it was 4 days later, as I recall, I get an emergency call from an operator, and the person who was involved in that incident was trying to reach me. I was on the line, was very busy with calls coming in. The operator broke in and said, I have an emergency call for you from this person who needs to talk to you. I took the call, and she said, I was trying to reach you, but I think I may have done something wrong. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I've been trying to call you. I found some possible hair samples out where the thing was standing. I wanted to give them to you. And she said, this man showed up with an Ohio license plate, kind of heavy set. I think it was kind of in a gray, like a work clothing type thing. I remember an odd belt, had some kind of an ID badge around it, something about UFO. And he wanted to interview her about her Bigfoot sighting. And she told him, she said, I've been trying to get hold of Stan Gordon. I have these hair samples. And he said, oh, I know Stan. Give them to me and I'll make sure he gets them, which he did. Well, whoever that guy was, we never found out, and I never saw the hair samples. But there was more to the story. There were other people there who were curious, who were looking at the footprints around her mobile home. And there was one little boy, and he had one of those old Polaroid cameras where you put the cartridge in and the picture comes out. He was taking pictures of that, and he grabs the picture from the kid, wrinkles it up, and says something like, you made a picture for us, and puts it in his pocket. Then he goes over in front of the people, and with his foot destroys the footprints. And these people start screaming, and they said, we're calling the police. And they said he got in his vehicle and got out there so fast they almost turned the car over. Who he was, we never found out.
Encounters with men in black go back a very long time. Since the 1940s, witnesses of UFOs claimed to have been visited by people dressed entirely in black, ill-fitting clothing. Typically, these men will attempt to harass or intimidate the witnesses, sometimes telling them not to discuss what they had seen. Oftentimes, these meetings are unnerving, if not terrifying. While no one knows for sure who or what the men in black are, the prevailing theory is that they are government agents sent to suppress information regarding the phenomena.
So there's a junkyard outside of Derry, Pennsylvania, where two teenagers reported seeing a Bigfoot. They hurried back, told their family, hey, we saw a Bigfoot in this junkyard. They took their parents back, and they indeed also had the same experience. They saw this Bigfoot. The next day, two men wearing black suits, showed some sort of government ID, were asked to enter the house, sat down with the boys, and the boys were told in no uncertain terms that this is no longer going to be discussed, that they did not see anything whatsoever.
They are intent on suppressing information on UFOs or Bigfoot by nefarious means, even going so far as to imply that they are someone else. For example, during the infamous 1966 Mothman flap in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reporter Mary Heyer was visited by a man who claimed to be a friend of Gray Barker, a prominent Fortean researcher of the time. The man asked many questions about John Keel, questions that Heyer refused to answer. Later, one of the witnesses that Keel interviewed was visited by a blonde-haired woman who claimed to be Keel's secretary. This was news to Keel, as he did not have a secretary. These cases of men in black are markedly strange. As per Keel's reporting, they asked witnesses personal questions about family background, took unsolicited photographs of people, including Keel and Ms. Heyer, and often seemed disoriented and even perplexed by everyday objects such as ink pens.
So we talked about that famous case, October 25th, 1973, out in Fayette County with the UFO on the ground to Bigfoot. For important cases, we'd keep in touch with some of these people who had important cases over the years just to see what had happened in their lives, anything else would happen. Years later, we'd go back and talk to the witness and think of that possibility and suggest to him we're considering maybe doing hypnosis. He looked at my associate and I very oddly, and he said, "Why do you want to hypnotize me again?" And we said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Probably it was about a week or two after it happened." Now, my teams have been up there many times after that incident happened. He thought somehow that these two fellows that showed up were somehow related to my group. The problem was, one was in an Air Force uniform, the other was in a dark suit. The fellow with the Air Force uniform had a briefcase. He said at the time, they came to him, they wanted him to explain everything that happened that night, what he saw, what the Bigfoot looked like, what the UFO looked like, and then the Air Force guy opens up his briefcase and pulls out photographs of UFOs and Bigfoot and wanted him to point out what looked similar. And he said at that point, they asked if they could hypnotize him, which apparently they did. When they were done, they said they believed he was telling the truth. They believed the story. They would be in touch. That was the last he ever saw them. And of course, we tried to track it down, but you got to remember now, that's 1973. The Air Force Project Blue Book had closed down officially in January 1970. So there was no records to be found, whoever they might be. So whether they were government or somebody else, we'll probably never know.
Project Blue Book was the United States Air Force systematic study of unidentified flying objects. The project was started in 1947, just after the famous Kenneth Arnold sighting in June of that year, as well as the Roswell incident a month later. Whatever the reasoning, Blue Book was officially terminated in 1969. The U.S. government had seemingly ended its study in the UFO world. In 2017, the U.S. government officially acknowledged ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, an unpublicized effort to study UFOs, or, as they have been rechristened, UAPs. Unidentified aerial phenomena. The program was terminated in 2012, 5 years before the government acknowledged it, leading many to speculate about how much more they were keeping secret from the public. It is important to note that reports of men in black predate the formation of Blue Book and continued after its termination. While the classic look of the men in black is not reported in present-day cases, a different form has emerged, a more tactical look. Soldiers and advanced military equipment are seen within days of encounters with Sasquatch or UFOs. If the men in black were part of a government suppression of the truth, could these military forces be a modern-day iteration of them?
I've also had reports from researchers that have been out in the woods, miles out in the woods, and come across military troops in the woods, doing whatever, stakeouts or whatever they would say. And also the idea of black helicopters around areas that are frequented by UFO investigators.
The only thing that I've heard about happened a number of years back, and there was a couple of researchers that were out in the ridge, and just by chance they happened across, from what they said, were a group of military people in uniform marching through the woods. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they were armed. So what they were doing, nobody knows.
I was told by these 3 other researchers who I'm friends with, they had come up to the Quebec Run Wilds in Forbes State Forest following my event with the orb, with the orange probe or whatever you want to decide it is. And during the middle of the weekday, early morning, they said that they were riding down this Quebec road in the rain. It wasn't a proper day for anyone to be out in the woods for. And as they first exited the blacktop paved road onto the dirt road, they discovered there was this cargo pickup truck with a personnel carrier on the back, and guys were at the back of the truck taking out backpacks, large backpacks, and they were in military camo fatigue, but they weren't standard issue. They were blue and other colors. Nobody was observing my friends. They ignored them as they drove by. So they went another 100 yards and there was another truck equal exactly. I mean, these were very swanky looking pickup trucks, and they just kind of threw their hand up and drove by this. Well, they continued on down. They were going to a location. They had a destination, a trailhead, that they wanted to go back and examine another incident where Bigfoot allegedly had been surrounding 2 guys at a campsite within a week of the time they arrived. And that was their whole mission, to be up on this location. So they continued a little further and they saw a 3rd truck. Same activity, same looking type of camo fatigues that they were wearing, and putting on these extremely large backpacks. And they went on down. Now they're talking, what's going on? Why is these military looking guys? They were thinking it was something to do with the Game Commission, because this is a state park, and they figured it was either state rangers or something. They didn't know it was military. There was no insignias on the truck. There was no indication of what these people, who they were. When they got to the parking lot where their destination was, there was another truck sitting there, and the same 2 or 3 guys getting on their backpacks. That's when they realized the driver was a civilian. So they pulled up kind of close to the truck, and one of the guys, he said, I'm going to go find out what's going on. So he gets out, and the other 2 sat there and watched. He goes over to the driver and he says, hey, what's going on? Why are you guys here? Well, the guy, he said, this is a camp of the Army base in North Carolina, Fort Bragg. And he said they've been down in West Virginia doing training exercises, and they're going to do map navigation in Quebec Run. And when I was told this, I said, why? This is an old area. It's got plenty of maps existing. Everyone knows the trails are very visible, very well marked. And why is the military from North Carolina sending personnel up here to Pennsylvania? Well, we didn't know what. They didn't explain any of that to us. So as these guys are getting their backpacks on, these 3 people I knew were watching them. Well, there was 2 marked trails right by where their truck is. Instead of going either one of those marked trails, they just went into off trail. They just went up into the woods and disappeared. So my friend said they went on down the trail, went to the location, did their research and analysis of the area, didn't find any information, came back, and there was no military trucks anywhere 45 minutes later.
In addition to ground forces, another aspect of the Men in Black phenomena has emerged in recent years.
I've seen a couple of very large Black Hawk helicopters fly over an area where we were doing research during the day. And I know there is a base around here somewhere, I just don't know where it's at, but I think we've witnessed 3 or 4 flying in a formation.
I've seen military helicopters circling over my head when I've been over there in this Dunbar area, in this Forbes State Forest area. And you get an uncomfortable feeling when something as big as a Apache helicopter is flying over your head in circles and then flies away, and it doesn't look like your ordinary standard military helicopter. It's all black.
In 2018, I was on a road trip to the state of Maine, and on the way there, we had a indirect route to get up there that took us on Route 70 across what's, I guess it's not like the southernmost end, but it's a more southern end of the Chestnut Ridge. You're somewhat close to Uniontown and that kind of area. But we're actually on a 4-lane highway, a big stretch of Route 70. Actually, we're coming up over the ridge on 70. And as we were starting down in the distance, we could see a black helicopter real low to the ground, real low to the highway coming toward us on the, like right above the highway, right down the middle. And I made a statement about, is that a helicopter directly over the road? And the person with me said it was. And the further along we got, the clearer it became that what we were seeing was some sort of large military helicopter. What was really strange is, so this was maybe 50, 60 feet above the highway. It was that low. When we got fairly close to it, it went up and then banked over the side of the ridge. And as it went, what was strange was that the side door of the helicopter was open. And again, this is a situation where the person that was with me said she saw nobody in the helicopter, but my recollection is that I saw people in the helicopter. So,
black helicopters. In the early 1990s, as Americans were becoming acquainted with names like Groom Lake, Area 51, and Bob Lazar, the intimidating presence of black unmarked helicopters in national airspace was reported with growing frequency. Initially linked to both UFO sightings and cattle mutilations, the aircraft were quickly co-opted by conspiracy theorists in service of New World Order narratives. In short order, the term black helicopters was greeted with the same contempt little green men once received. However, public eye-rolling did nothing to slow the inconvenient appearance of stealth copters over desolate areas where unexplained incidents transpired. Their impossibility, the perfect cover for unimpeded activity. In this regard, they are indeed analogous to Men in Black, an extra layer of weirdness that works to keep witnesses silent.
Over the years, I've heard different people talking about black helicopters being involved with UFO incidents. I can tell you this, 1972, I mentioned about an incident happening outside of Greensburg, but there have been a lot of other UFO incidents going on for months in other parts of the area. One thing that was going on in Westmoreland County, we were getting reports from various people for weeks of formations of luminous spherical objects in the sky and some type of metallic material falling at times from these objects. So we were getting out to some of these locations and we recovered some of that metallic material. For a better term, we call it space grass. John Keel talked about finding something similar back years before. There was one incident up on the Backley side of the Chestnut Ridge. People had found this metallic material, this residue in the trees, in the branches, on the ground, and it came down in clumps. So we recovered that material. And over the years, I had various professional labs examine it, and we know what the material was made of. It was almost 100% aluminum, most of it. But nobody could identify what this was or what the purpose was. And these were thousands of strands of this very thin metallic material, all interwoven together. So it didn't disperse like a radar shaft, it came down in clumps. During that time, there were quite a number of reports of military helicopters in those areas, but they weren't black. These are more like Apache-type helicopters, as I recall.
But for what purpose does the U.S. military, and by extension the government, want to discredit or suppress discussion of the sightings? Some speculate it could be to protect large industries such as mining or logging, to promote a sense of safety in our society, sending the message that the things that go bump in the night are only stories for children and need not be taken seriously, thereby maintaining a type of control over the populace. Or perhaps they are hiding the existence of other dimensions.
During like the mid-70s, you started to read in UFO Report, you started to read about Bigfoot sightings in conjunction with UFOs. Interdimensional kind of took place about in the 80s. John Keel talked about like the ultra-terrestrials, the Mothman, and how he talked about the ultra, that some kind of an earth energy, earth force that can manipulate shapes, manipulate what you see. So did they have anything to do with UFO occupants? Some of them seem to be more oriental in color, and some of them seem to not know things like how to use a spoon. I know it happened down Point Pleasant during the Mothman sightings. They might not be physical creatures on Earth.
You've got some of these things that they look physically solid at times. In other cases, these things, part of the body's in focus. In other cases, you can see parts of the body that are not clear, or sometimes they give you that misty effect. Sometimes they're going from a solid thing and have the more non-solid appearance to them as well.
For many, the suggestion of an alternate dimension seems like a cop-out. To explain away mysteries with other mysteries, or in other words, explaining the unexplained with the unexplained, seems far too convenient. Combine that with countless internet forums that suggest wildly outlandish theories as to what these other dimensions are, and one finds themselves tossing the whole concept away. Nevertheless, the works of many Fortean researchers explore the concept of other dimensions, sometimes referred to as the Goblin Universe. John Keel hypothesized that everything considered paranormal by a modern person, from UFOs to Mothman to ghosts and cryptids, is connected. They all emanate from the same source. What that source is unknown. Keel even goes so far as to suggest that religions are based on our collective awareness of this force, and a result of our attempt to make it understandable. This phenomena has taken different forms over the centuries, from dragons to fairies, Egyptian gods, to aliens from different planets. It was Keel's belief that these manifestations influence our society, pushing us in a direction it wants us to go. Many people may be content with turning the other direction, but others are fascinated with trying to discover this force's true nature.
Well, we are at the site called Livermore, which used to be an old town. It was pretty prosperous in the 1820s. That's whenever it started. The canal came through here, which was very, very important. It linked Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, and it kept on going. This was a prosperous town as well, too. It had a hotel in it. It was big enough to have its own baseball team. And then May of 31st of 1889, the first Johnstown flood came through. Then there was another one in the 30s, the St. Patrick's Day flood. That kind of really sealed the deal for this. The Army Corps of Engineers bought everybody out, raised the town down to nothing, and then flooded the towns out. This is one of those unique areas where when we come down here, something always kind of happens, you know. So it's kind of like the perfect spot for anything paranormal. So there's been sightings of Bigfoot-like creatures down here since the 1950s, UFO reports, dogmen reports, and of course a cemetery up there, so they're haunting. So this is like the perfect storm for all these kind of things. And as an investigator, bring my son out, we don't know if we're dealing with something supernatural or something, you know, flesh and blood. So when we come out here, we kind of cover all aspects. So we'll bring EMF readers to see if there's any kind of change in the electromagnetism of the area. Or what we started to use too is spirit boxes, you know, to see if there's any kind of responses. And we were out here, you know, several months ago. We were actually on the other side of that bridge right there. Strange things were happening. There was a lot of noises. So we decided that we were going to utilize the spirit box and see what happened. So
we were using the spirit box, and the question was asked, what is down here? And we got clearly over the spirit box, Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And now this was
immediately,
this was a sweep over 3 different frequencies.
Yeah. And that was one of the first things. So whenever that happened, things started to get a little bit more weird, because you would think, okay, that's like an anomalous thing that could have happened. But as we started back towards the vehicle, we saw in the woods, which would appear to be almost like a campfire, right? Is that how?
A campfire, what would have looked like a lantern almost, up on the hill, actually right over there.
Yeah. But it was blocking the trail,
It was,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So we thought, well, there has to be people there, what have you. So as it took our time to walk up to where the fire was, the fire just went out, but
There was a tree over the trail.
that's right where the fire was burning. No sign of the fire, no smell, no embers, nothing like that. And then as we were examining the tree,
We heard from coming up from the cemetery, there was almost like a chanting noise.
yeah,
There was two different groups, and we were up further towards the car, and my dad and another person was down closer to the road, like down on the path, and we both heard a chanting. It was clear as day. There was something, and it seemed to be coming almost towards us from the woods.
they were definitely female voices.
Female,
Definitely
yes.
female voices. Indistinct. You could hear that there was a pattern of language going on, but you couldn't make out the noise. And as they came closer, like any good investigator would do, we simply took off.
Paranormal investigators swear by EMF readers. But do they actually work?
It stands for electronic magnetic field, and it is said that we're all made up of some kind of energy, and when we die, that energy is released back into the atmosphere. So when spirits interact with it, that is their energy that is being picked up. And
as a ghost hunter, that's what you would want to sell, okay? That's your mantra,
Yes.
okay? So this is going off, something's affecting it, so there has to be a ghost around me. But in our way of thinking is, there's something in the environment that we're not seeing. It could be electromagnetism from the geology of the place as well too. It doesn't have to be spirit related, but all we're pointing out here is that with the EMF detector, we are picking up things that shouldn't be being picked up, whatever's causing that manifestation of this particular energy.
And a lot of it could also, like I said, be with the Appalachian Plateau. There was a lot of coal mining. There was a lot of stuff being brought
Limestone,
from
granite,
the earth.
yeah, exactly.
That could have even caused this to cause the EMF to go off. That maybe also heightens why there's spirits around.
I think that's a great point, because when we were walking up here, we talked about how this used to be called, the River of Otters, right? The first people that settled this area came here for trapping, right? Now this river is dead, and the reason why it's dead is the leaching of sulfur from the mines in there. So really, everything that we have done to this environment around us has been, it's been man-made. The reason why this place has been destroyed is because of men. And I absolutely adhere to that. I think that what we have done is we possibly could have released things into the environment that shouldn't be there.
An electromagnetic frequency reader will tell you exactly that, whether there is an electromagnetic signal present or not. That information is limited and by no means the most complete. Sometimes the best tool for experiencing this phenomena is with one's own eyes.
A lot of people don't want to talk about certain things, and I understand, whether it be different, religions, non-religion, maybe they're just scared, but there are so many stories that are so real that need to come out in Chestnut Ridge. And that's why I'm here today, to let people know this stuff is real. This stuff is not made up. So the legend, it's real. And I was just coming up from work, and it's a recreational little area, just beautiful, beautiful forest, beautiful woods, nothing but peace and quiet. I don't have electricity, it's just raw relaxation, which is great. So, sorry, this is just, it's very terrifying. We pulled in to the gravel driveway, and my friend got out. He went into the makeshift little cabin that we had over there, and I got out, and it was dark except for seeing, you have your bright moonlight shining down on everything. I'm standing just right straight, say the road is right there, right where you are. And then there's two trees that are split off. So I'm looking right there, and it's pretty dark. You can only see a silhouette. That's all I saw. And two huge red, they look like stoplights. They were glowing. I've worked with wild animals. This is not stoplights. It's not panthers. I know, because I was trying to debunk anything I could figure, but I was so nervous and I was so terrified. It stopped and looked at me approximately about 5 to 7 minutes. Then it turned, and I couldn't see anything, so I figured it might have just, whatever it was, it turned. Then it looked at me again, but it was shaped like this. And that's all I could see because it's so dark in the woods. Just that moonlight shining on that and these two huge round eyes. It was terrifying. And then it turned around another approximate, like 5 to 7 minutes. It looked at me again. So I'm like, okay, you're gonna look at me, I'm looking at you. You know what I mean? I used to do security work, so I'm trying to figure out what the heck this is. I felt something come over me. I felt so sick. I mean, it felt like worse than flu. I was nauseous, something stunk. I smelled like rotten eggs, you know, and I wasn't smelling this before. It was not sulfur. I would have been smelling it the whole time. So I'm trying so hard to debunk and figure out what this is. Next thing I know, after all that had happened, and I was just like doubled over and I couldn't get it out. I'm like, help, help. I couldn't get my voice out. Nobody could come out, no one could hear me. Then I saw like this foggy stuff. Literally, it just dissipated down the road, 653 East, right straight down, like you're gonna go towards town. And then after that, there was like nothing else, and I'm trying to get my body to move, and I was terrified. And then after that had happened, there was some people from, because I had never been to one of these before, this Brownsville, Pennsylvania, like a Bigfoot kind of festival going on. I said, okay, no one's gonna believe me, but I'm gonna try and explain this because something had happened. I don't understand what that was, who that was, why this happened to me. Well, anyways, so I went over and I met this person named Les Odell. I sat down inside this pavilion and he was at a picnic table. He talked to me and I appreciate that. People need to at least listen. You can believe us and you can not believe us. That's your choice. I respect that. But at least hear the person out. He respected me. He came out. Going back, we both drew this same figure and then we turned around and he goes, do you know what you just drew? And I said, no, because I'm not familiar with all this stuff. I know medical stuff. You know what I mean? And he said, you saw the Mothman, and that was a sign of some things that were supposed to happen. Well, I wish this Mothman could have told me lots of things, you know what I mean? Because I was in an accident, like, later on, you know, and he thinks some things might have been linked and also something having to do with, I think his father's passing. He said something wanted you to, you know, to see them. Because it didn't hurt me or anything, but I didn't know it was not gonna hurt me. So I'm like trying to figure what I'm seeing out of that. But I was feeling nauseous, sick after this. I went to next after that to an IHOP meeting, those restaurants IHOP, and there was a lady named Lisa Blackwell. Well, I figured, okay, I'm still sick. I've gone to a doctor. They tell me that they can't figure this out. But she did something, and I said, well, why not? I'll let you do this. I actually felt something come out of me, and I'm not nuts. I'm totally fine, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't smoke. I'm not boring, I like the nature. You know, I like kayaking, swimming when I get a chance. You know, I knew something was wrong with me. I felt her going like this. I know it sounds weird, but that's what happened to me. I sat there and it was a cleansing, I found that out. She must have had some special power? I don't know. All I know is what I felt. And I just cried and cried after I felt something go whoosh and leave my body. And I had tingling all over my arms. She said, you must have had some kind of weird something, an entity or some kind of something. Because I wasn't sick after that. I mean, I don't understand. Something came out of me.
The typical Mothman narrative begins with the shadowy winged creature arriving in Point Pleasant in 1966 and disappearing in 1967 after the collapse of the Silver Bridge. In reality, sightings have continued to the present day, most recently making headlines in 2017 when a flap of sightings occurred near Lake Michigan. Many witnesses report a feeling of dread overcoming them, or in very rare instances, positive feelings of safety and affirmation. One of many criticisms of the field of Forteana is the quote-unquote lack of consistency in reports. And certainly in the more paranormal realm, witness experiences tend to be highly subjective. But there are a few sightings that have independent corroboration.
There was one in Brady's Run State Park, which is in Beaver County. This is one where a gentleman was laying in his hammock and he heard crashing through the woods, like something was busting trees. He gets up from the hammock and he sees this white, about 7 foot tall creature standing next to a limb, and he was holding on to the limb, and it saw him, and then it went back into the forest. Now they have baseball fields there. So another report that we got, it wasn't of a white one, but some guy was walking his dog towards evening, and his dog starts barking violently, and they heard some screams coming from those baseball fields. And those baseball fields were maybe 300 yards from where this white creature sighting was. A week after that happened, this woman was letting out her dog. The dog, it was doing its business, it stopped and it started to sniff and look into this one area. And the woman looks and she sees this white creature standing next to this tree. And she said it looked more like a Pyrenees dog. And we got this in a couple. It was white, but the hair kind of covered its eyes, which is an unusual feature, which we found that out in the one case in Beaver Creek State Park along a horse trail. And the other woman who saw it was right in Beaver County, which would have been maybe 4 miles as the crow flies. And she had 2 sightings of a white creature in 20 years now, not real soon. But so I asked her, I said, would you like to talk to the other witness? And I asked them both, because you don't give out eyewitness information. And they both agreed to meet. And unfortunately, the day they agreed to meet, we had something we had to do. I couldn't get out of it. And when they both met, because I talked to both of them afterwards, they said, we saw the same thing. After over 20 years, we saw the same thing. It had the hair, it was about 7 foot tall, it was all white. It had the hair over its eyes. I mean, again, I had goosebumps down my arm, because here's 2 people that don't know each other. They said this was the same thing.
Despite the variances between sightings, there seems to be one recurrent trend: fear.
Most are in shock, like they can't believe what they just saw. They've never had a belief in it, never had I'm sure they might have heard the stories because that's pretty commonplace around here, but they never really believed it was real until they had their experience, and then afterwards they're in shock and they're trying to figure out what they saw and getting answers. I've had people that have never had a belief become full-fledged researchers just because they saw it, they want to know more about it, they want to see it again, they want to find out everything they can about it, so they start researching through books and going out into the woods at night to try to have experiences. And yeah, there's been people that have had their lives literally turned upside down. We met with a woman and her daughter that had a sighting in 2009 by Camp Carmel. It was basically a power line sighting where they stopped at the top of the hill, were looking down into the power line. They heard noise rustling. They were thinking it was a deer coming out of the trees, and this creature walked out, crossed the gas well line, and disappeared into the power line into the trees on the right. And it messed up the girl so badly that when we went back the next day, the mother was like, yeah, I'll show you where it happened. The daughter wouldn't get out of the car. In the car by herself, locked all the doors, and she was shaking. You could see her literally shaking in the back seat of the car. She was like, that happens quite frequently, where people just have such an adverse effect from what they saw that they shut down. They don't want to go back out in the woods. They don't want to talk to anybody about it. They just want to forget about it. They put a mental block on, and that's all she wrote. They won't tell you about it, even if you try to coerce them or calmly talk to them and say, it's okay, I'm not going to make fun of you, I'm not going to ridicule you. They just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to relive that.
People grow up being told that monsters don't exist. And when they come face to face with one, their entire worldview changes. For many, this is an uncomfortable and unwanted perspective shift, one they would prefer to forget. But a tiny fraction of witnesses will pursue what they saw. No longer content with their old view of the world, they are pulled towards these creatures in a quest for the truth. Some have dedicated decades of their lives to this seemingly endless pursuit.
I've spent now over 62 years involved in this case. I've been out since 1965 in the field investigating. I've interviewed thousands of UFO witnesses, hundreds of Bigfoot and cryptid witnesses. I can just tell you, my ideas and thoughts have changed a lot over the years. Because when I got involved in this, especially as a young kid back in 1959 and into the 60s, when I knew about UFOs, I thought for sure that, like many people, they were probably spacecraft from another planet. But as the years have gone by more and more, I think that's less likely. I think that it's very possible we're dealing with more than one origin to the unknown category of the UFO phenomena. So maybe a small percentage might be extraterrestrial. But I think more and more, certain types of UFOs, Bigfoot, some of the various cryptids are being reported, these small spheres of light, other phenomena, it's somehow all interconnected somehow. We don't understand it. There's a physical and a non-physical component to it. For a lack of a better term, I think we're doing something that's interdimensional, which is why we come up with no bodies with Bigfoot. You know, Bigfoot has been seen, or some variation of Bigfoot has been seen, not only in the United States, but all over the world for years and years and years, and yet nobody's ever come up with a body. That doesn't mean that, could there possibly be some type of unknown primate still out there? Yes, but there's also this other category, and again, how do you differentiate? We don't have enough data between a Bigfoot that looks physically solid one moment and then disappears in the next moment, or the tracks physically change. So here again, you've got this phenomena. You know, over the years, we have 3-toe tracks, we have 4-toe tracks, we have 5-toe tracks, and then you have this menagerie of all kind of other tracks that we've found over the years. In some cases, we're out there within minutes, hours after people find them. There was no indication in those cases that the tracks were fabricated. Have we had hoaxes over the years? Yes. You could tell them very easily in most cases. But these other cases were very, very strange tracks. They're credible witnesses. They had no reason to make up the story. 90% of them, 95% wanted no publicity, which still is the way it is today. And how can you have so many type of unknown creatures? It can't be. So there's got to be something that's common to all this phenomena. As weird as it sounds, you've got these spheres of light that some people swear have changed into a cryptid. You have cryptids that supposedly have changed into other cryptids from reports from around the country and around the world. You've got these lights that are associated with Bigfoot sightings. You had the Bigfoot carrying the sphere of light in his hand north of Pittsburgh years ago. I've had cases in more recent years, a Bigfoot sighting, and seconds later, in the same exact location where the Bigfoot entered the woods, this small sphere of light appears. And at some point, during those few seconds that's being watched, a long beam of light comes out of it, then it vanishes and disappears. There's something else going on here. It's something that I believe is far beyond our present understanding, far beyond anything that I think science understands right now. I think we're dealing with something that's very strange and unusual, and I know one thing, we won't figure it out in my lifetime.
As with any field, those who have gone before inspire a new generation to follow in their proverbial footsteps. Their example drives others to take on the search with a new fervor that others may have lost.
And one of the more profound stories I remember from being a child, my dad took me down here when we were younger. It was hot, there was no water that day. The Conemaugh was very low, and we saw what looked like a barefooted man who had walked in the riverbed itself. They were huge prints down in the river, which is a good 20 feet below us.
The passing of the torch, the passing on of stories to fresh ears eager to hear, is one of the many things that make us human. Stories passed from generation to generation, given enough time, become folklore. They become part of the culture. So even if a story is not historically true, they can still be true in a different way.
So one of the biggest pieces of folklore, and why we always are talking about hearing a woman's voice, is one of the legends down here, and it's a quite old legend as well too. At one point this place used to be called Satan's Seat. It's a colloquialism for this area, and the legend happens is that back in 1789, there was a witch that lived down here. Okay, that's the story that they're telling, and she was a hedge witch. You know, she lived outside of the community, and it was at that particular time it was necessary. The nearest doctor from here was probably 2 or 3 days away. So if you had a baby that needed to be born or somebody needed patched up, you would have to go to somebody that would have some sort of medicinal knowledge about the area. And so the idea of a witch being around here is not beyond the realm of possibility. But as the legend goes, children being born, stillborn, animals started to die, crops were being dried up, and so it had to be a witch, right? I mean, that was the general say. So as a historian, you look and say, is this possible? 1789, is it possible that there could be a witch down here? Absolutely. So in 1727, the last witch was born in Scotland. So, burned in Scotland, right. So if there were people down, this is a Scotch-Irish location, right? This is where the immigrants came from. So if something's not going well, either somebody possibly could have seen it themselves, or at least they heard it from their parents and grandparents, that this is the way we deal with an outsider. So if desperate times called for desperate measures, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they took this woman and kind of burned her in a last-ditch effort that their community could be saved. Now, as the story goes, as the flames leaped upon her, she called out that within 100 years' time, I will send enough water in here to quench these flames. And sure enough, 100 years later to the day was the Johnstown flood that destroyed most of this area. So that is the folklore to the area. But again, it is folklore. You have to take it, as it comes. But it's odd that we hear these kind of womanly voices down, these female voices down here, and it alludes back to possibly something else is going on here rather than just flesh and blood matters.
And I think it's the other thing about the Appalachian region when we talk about like EMFs, and this area has so much history and folklores that have been passed down by generation to generation. So it could also just be our energy being released back into nature that causes these events to happen.
Yeah, if you want to go metaphysical that way. I mean, a lot of people do think that as well too, that, because all these stories have been told and retold so many times, that it becomes a life of its own.
Energy, intention, belief. Different words for what often is conversationally referring to the same thing, an unseen aspect of ourselves that bears meaning. It's what allows us to cry during movies or laugh at Tom and Jerry. Folklore, while not true in the same way that our day-to-day lives are, is true because it bears meaning. Storytelling has come a long way from sharing stories around a campfire, but the very art of it has become ingrained in us in a way that is often hard to articulate. Every bit of information we receive helps us to craft a narrative about ourselves and the world around us, and anyone withholding information, no matter how big or small, is enough to garner our distrust. The further we slip into the age of information, the easier it is to hide secrets behind walls of doublespeak and deliberate misinformation, the threads of which are often so hard to untangle it can drive one mad, trying to find an objective truth. But still, some try, even at the risk of being silent.